All right, y'all, welcome to the show. Welcome. So today I'm going to give you the based news of the IRS cracking down on wealthy tax cheats. Some phenomenal stuff on that front. We also have terrifying story about how apparently for the first time in history, a Category 5 hurricane has formed in every single ocean basin this year. Wild stuff. I'm also going to give you guys what I view as Joe Biden's biggest weakness heading into 2024, which if he were to, get the nomination and then lose the election, this I think would be a big part of it. This is a super duper important story that hasn't been highlighted nearly enough. We'll talk about that. Then California has decided it's time to get high as balls because they are decriminalizing certain psychedelic drugs. I think that's phenomenal. And then we also have later on today, Ted Cruz and Larry Kudlow over on CNN run through a litany of fake attacks on the Democrats. Things that are completely and utterly made up. And honestly, it's all these guys got to try to argue that they are better than the Democrats are. So without further ado, let's go ahead and dive into it here. So look at this, guys. This is in the Associated Press. The IRS plans to crack down on 1,600 millionaires to collect millions of dollars in back taxes. So if you guys remember, it wasn't that long ago that we learned one of the pieces of legislation passed by the Democrats and signed by Biden expands or just makes the size of the IRS larger, okay? And I believe the number was like 82,000 IRS agents, but I'm trying to remember the specifics. It may have ultimately ended up only being like 50 or 55,000 or so. I'm blanking on the specifics on that, but what I remember is I read, I think it was a New York Times or Washington Post article that went in detail about the specifics of what's in this legislation. And what was made perfectly clear is that this expansion of the IRS was just an attempt to basically bring it back to what it was before there was a war on the IRS. And when there was a war on the IRS, it got smaller, and then the IRS would turn their focus on working class people and try to shake them down over their taxes. Now, when you have a bigger, beefed up IRS, what happens is you get enough agents, and they actually can do the much harder work of going after the wealthy tax cheats. And what was clear in the article I read is that this is going to be focused, so these new IRS agents are going to be tasked with going after people who make $400,000 a year or more. So in other words, now the focus has shifted from let's go after working class people with a rundown and tiny IRS. Let's beef it up and let's actually aim at going after wealthy tax cheats. Okay, I 100% agree with those priorities. And so that's why, and by the way, the right was relentlessly lying about the IRS expansion, and they were acting like, oh no, they're going to come after, like people who make $27,000 a year. And it's like, it is the exact opposite of that. Okay. Well, now we get this update. The IRS announced on Friday it is launching an effort to aggressively pursue 1,600 millionaires and 75 large business partnerships that owe hundreds of millions of dollars in past due taxes. IRS Commissioner Daniel Werfel said that with a boost in federal funding and the help of artificial intelligence tools, the agency has new means of targeting wealthy people who have cut corners on their taxes. Okay, so let's pause here to point out, I'm agnostic on whether or not AI makes sense to use for this particular task. It's very possible that you use AI and it helps out. It's possible you use AI and it doesn't do as good of a job as good old-fashioned brain power of human beings. So we'll have to wait and see. But the goal of targeting these wealthy folks who are dodging their tax, I think that's wonderful. If you pay your taxes on time, it should be particularly frustrating when you see that wealthy filers are not, Werfel told reporters in a call previewing the announcement. He said 1,600 millionaires who owe at least $250,000 each in back taxes and 75 large business partnerships that have assets of roughly $10 billion on average are targeted for the new compliance efforts. Werfel said a massive hiring effort and AI research tools developed by IRS employees and contractors are playing a big role in identifying wealthy tax dodgers. The agency is making an effort to showcase positive results from its burst of new funding under President Joe Biden's Democratic administration as Republicans in Congress look to claw back some of that money. New tools are helping us see patterns and trends that we could not see before, and as a result, we have higher confidence on where to look and find where large partnerships are shielding income, he said. In July, IRS leadership said it collected $38 million in delinquent taxes from more than 175 high-income taxpayers in the span of a few months. Now the agency will scale up that effort, Werfel said. The IRS will have dozens of revenue officers focused on these high-end collection cases in fiscal year 2024. A team of academic economists and IRS researchers in 2021 found that the top 1% of U.S. income earners failed to report more than 20% of their earnings to the IRS. So look, this is definitely good. It's definitely a step in the right direction. The thing I would add on top of this is that as part of the Inflation Reduction Act, one of the best provisions, which is pretty much never mentioned by anybody but me, is that we now have a 15% corporate minimum tax rate. And that's for businesses that have, I think, like over $1 billion in revenue or thereabouts. And 15% corporate minimum tax rate is a huge deal because there's so many of these giant corporations that pay nothing in taxes at all. They have a team of accountants and experts and tax lawyers who find these loopholes and deductions and weasel their way out of paying anything. And you even have some companies that pay effectively a negative tax rate. So they pay nothing in taxes and they get a net subsidy from the taxpayers. And that's corporate welfare. It is horrible. It is the last thing we need or should have. And so to have that 15% corporate minimum tax rate is a huge deal. It's a huge deal. Can't overstate how phenomenal that is. Giant step in the right direction. Now, this stuff, honestly, if I'm keeping it real, this is a little more of a drop in the bucket compared to the 15% corporate minimum tax rate. But again, this is definitely good, and I definitely want to see more of this from the Biden administration. And remember, guys, there's still one elephant in the room in this conversation, which is the Holy Grail. The super rich hold $32 trillion in offshore havens. Now, to be fair, this is an article going back over a decade. This is 2012. I'm not sure exactly what the number is today. And also, I'm not sure, what the number is for the U.S. in particular, right? But it's certainly trillions of dollars, and it's certainly, at the very least, hundreds of billions of dollars that are being kept from the U.S. government, which could be used, if you crack down on these corporate tax cheats and these billionaire tax cheats, just with that money alone, you could fund some sort of phenomenal social safety net program, which could greatly help, millions and millions of people in America. I mean, there's been a lot of studies coming out lately, these UBI pilot programs, and they've been super successful, man. There's nothing has made me happier than seeing the studies coming out on 4-day work week, which is like, hey, everybody's just as productive, if not more productive, and everybody's happier. Okay, what's there to lose? There's nothing to lose. 4-day work week's been great, and the UBI pilot studies have been phenomenal. So if you just crack down on the corporate tax cheats, if you just crack down on the wealthy tax cheats, you could create some sort of UBI program or something. It would be, that would be transformational. That'd be the biggest transformation of the U.S. economy since the New Deal, if I'm being honest. And if that's not enough revenue through just cracking down on the tax cheats, you could also find a way, like, again, as part of the Inflation Reduction Act, we have a 1% tax on stock buybacks. You could do a 50% tax on stock buybacks, or you could, honestly, you should ban stock buybacks. They were banned before Ronald Reagan made them legal. It's totally, stock buybacks are really gross. Robert Reich did a great breakdown of just how ludicrous they are. But anyway, there's other ways, like a Wall Street transaction tax, for example, that Bernie Sanders has talked about. That could be used also to fund a UBI program. So if you mix the money from the corporate and billionaire tax cheats with the money from Wall Street transaction tax, you might be able to get a UBI program going. I'm just spitballing here, but the fact of the matter is this. We are now cracking down on wealthy tax cheats. That is phenomenal, and I hope it continues, and I hope we go further. Hey, y'all, do me a favor and like and subscribe. It helps out big time in the algorithm. Click the bell as well for notifications when videos drop, and watch that video on screen right now. You know you want to.